Well, we're sometimes plagued by an odd system bug when we start. Sometimes all cameras freeze. Good to see you, Charles.
Nice to see you, Jason. You're looking spiffy.
Thank you very much, and you are as always. So let me I need to reboot these inputs here. I don't know how, I thought I had that sorted out, but apparently no. Gotta reinitialize each camera for it to begin properly. Charles, today we have a wonderful topic. I worked quite diligently to create the graphic for today.
It's fantastic.
Thank you. I'm striving to impress you and the Crowdsource community with each of these graphic photo collages that we've become sort of well known for. For people who don't know, the Secret Policeman's other ball is the famous Monty Python film, but today we're going to be exploring how these charity balls are used to bilk the underprivileged around the world.
Exactly. I think, we should spend maybe a few minutes just going into each of these images because they're so fantastic.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's based on the original poster for the film, but it's also, in my mind, somewhat reminiscent of a Mad magazine cover. Right. So it was anchored, of course, by, what is he, 42?
42, exactly.
POTUS 42, everybody's favorite rapist, allegedly, Bill Clinton. Of course, his wife, ready to blow up the world there.
And herself.
Yes. The man to ever do nothing. He's my least favorite, or one of my least favorite presidents, George W., and of course, Dick Cheney on a hunting expedition.
Right. Angry Dick Cheney.
That's his normal resting state.
Yeah.
He is ready to pull the plug and become 43.
He would have been, 43.
Right.
44, I guess.
44.
After.
Right. Sorry. And then this was a mystery one that wasn't easily figured out. This is, of course, Jennifer Flowers, who's pulling off a towel to reveal her business attire.
That's right.
Andrew McCabe about to smack Anthony Weiner in the head with a guitar. I could have done the face color a little bit better on there. And of course,
good.
Huma's back here pregnant while Mr. Weiner is exposing himself.
I know.
And we've got the Podesta brothers, talking about it. H.W., he might be my least favorite of all time. We've got Vince Foster back here with some arrows in his back. This is an obvious suicide.
You know what? I just realized something. You did this. You're a pure genius. You put Adam Schiff in there.
This guy. And then we've got Mr. Obama. We've got James Comey. We've got Barbara Bush back there. The whole gang is here for the charity ball that everybody has been waiting for. Now, Charles, people who might be trying to watch us live right now on YouTube are getting a little bit of an unfortunate surprise. The YouTube live streaming capability was unceremoniously cut on just the other day, on the 15th of February.
Was that by their Russian branch? Or?
Well, I don't know if they have a constitution in Russia that protects freedom of speech, but what happened was, you remember, of course, Hector Carmona, who has the story about really terrible animal abuse within the Fédération Équestrienne Internationale, which, as I understand it, is owned by Sheikh Maktoum of Dubai and is involved in dressage, where horses are systematically, basically tortured. And this is not my, terminology. This is what's coming from veterinarians and equestrian experts around the world, that this practice of roll cure, of bending the horse's neck forward to create what's considered a more aesthetically pleasing look for the horse, is actually very damaging to the health of horses. Now, there are a very, very limited number of people who brought it to my attention that there might be some veterinarians who argue that point, that it's not bad for horses. I think they're the same doctors that were making the Lucky Strike commercials in 1953. But, we put out a story in which Hector presented his evidence, photographic evidence, professional testimony from veterinarians and horse trainers and equestrian experts like himself. And he implicated the Spanish riding school in Austria as partaking in this animal cruelty. And rather than responding saying, hey, what you're saying is false, you should print a retraction, they hit me with a copyright strike on YouTube, saying that by showing elements of their web page or showing their logo, I was violating their copyright. Now, this is obviously false, because when we're doing a news report and reporting on allegations against a company, even though the allegations may or could be shown to be false, we're presenting this news story without malice. I had never heard of the Spanish riding school before, and I certainly have nothing against them or the FEI, other than these allegations that Hector has shown us that are very well researched. So some people have been having a strange reaction to the video that I put out to announce to everyone that we have been suspended for 90 days from live streaming, saying that YouTube is not a government utility, it's not a public service, it's a private company, and they can make their own rules, which I fully understand and agree with. But as I illustrated in the video last night, Google sent me an email at 9:01 a.m. on February the 14th, encouraging me to contact the complainant and try to rectify this matter, or to voluntarily delete the video. So as I understand it, when I enter into a terms of use agreement with Google to create my YouTube account, and they send me directives in writing that say you have 48 hours, that's a rule established by a private club that has allowed me into the private club. And in trying to play by the rules, 35 hours and 6 minutes had expired, and they cut the live stream more than 12 hours earlier than they had said they would. I certainly could have removed the video in the next 12 hours, or possibly rectified the situation with the Austrian law firm that had pressured Google to essentially violate my First Amendment rights of freedom of speech, freedom of the press, etc. So it's a serious situation in my view, and people can still watch us live streaming on periscope.tv/CS The Truth. And they can also see us on Facebook by joining the Crowdsource the Truth group on Facebook. Or if they really want freedom of speech, they can go to the Russian social media network, vk.com, and search for Crowdsource the Truth, where our reach is actually growing. Episodes of Sunday with Charles are getting in excess of 140 views per episode, which is very low compared to what we're getting on YouTube and Periscope and Facebook, but pretty remarkable considering you and I aren't in Russia, don't speak Russian, don't know that many Russian people at all. I guess maybe Mr. Putin is watching on the VK network.
Hopefully Anna Chapman's watching.
So sorry for that long
That's all
diatribe,
right.
but I wanted everybody to know what's going on. And I think it's important, more than ever, that people sign up for Periscope and that we find out what happened.
Right.
Yeah, find out what happened there. So without further ado, Charles, I think we're ready possibly to present your slides for the day. It's always a thrilling presentation, and I know you like to explain the rules to everyone, so we might as well do that.
So in my, actually many decades ago, when I was then married and when we were socializing here in New York and in upstate where we had a home, we would get involved just as because of nature, nothing unusual, just in going to many of these charity parties. And I don't, that, and I think our viewers know, I don't really like crowds, and so I don't like these kind of parties. And I especially don't like, going to the Waldorf Astoria and have a rubber chicken dinner, seeing all these pictures of desperately poor people as everyone else is walking around in evening dresses and going to limousines and this. Something was off for me with that.
Yeah.
And I'd rather see money, if there is a worthy cause, and there are many worthy causes, I'd rather see the money go to actually help, not the administrators of the charity,
right?
Not to puff up the egos of the socialites around the charity, but instead to really help and fix things. And I'm sure you've been to countless charity events, and more often than not, nobody really, you write the check because some friend has got a wife or whatever is involved with a charity, and so you say, okay, I gotta go, or I'll take a table or whatever.
Right.
And you never really check to see
where the money goes.
And there's no real granular disclosure for these charities as to how much money they took in and why they really needed it, as in the case of the Clinton Grifter Initiative. Why do you need to spend $6-8 million on a 4-day party in New York? I mean, that's opulent. I mean, the Sultan of Brunei would have a hard time spending $6 to $8 million on a party.
Well, you could just book Beyonce to...
Exactly. But so this whole subject of charity balls, they sound good, and in theory they can be useful, but rather than spending $10,000 on a table and then all the attendant, the dressing and the traveling and all this kind of stuff, why don't we figure out, cut out the charity balls and figure out what are the causes, cut off the charity balls, figure what are the causes that really do need to be supported. So then, having had this personal experience, and I've been to charities that are good and charities that are not so good, and I'm sure there are some charities that do these type of gala fundraising events well and properly. But as I started to think about the Clinton Foundation and charities allied with the Clinton Foundation, I began to notice, more and more examples of egregious behavior. And so that's what we're going to talk about here today, just picking on 3 countries, Austria, Canada, and the United Kingdom.
That's good.
And where there are these, Austria is a good one to pick on,
It's
right?
ironic, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. To pick on these 3 countries, and there are many others, we could pick on many states, we could pick on, well, we want to just start by picking on 3 countries. And then as we talk about this, it's important to remember that when you run a charity, especially a U.S. charity that's operating internationally, you must control its operations tightly from a U.S. base. You can't set up, the Goodman charity, the Ortel charity, and start having, some idiot in New Delhi, set up a charity gala where they sell way more tickets than they tell you that they actually sold. They steal the money, and they say they're going to help some flood victim somewhere in India, but who's going to tell?
Right.
I mean, no one really knows. You go there, it looks ravaged. It's less ravaged. It's more. Who knows?
Why is it that charities are so ripe for fraud?
Because people are too trusting. It's a natural human tendency is to not be cynical as cynical as you should be. I can't even say it. So when it comes to supposed do-gooding work,
right?
It's the rare bird who's going to say, that's a charity, that's a fraud, right away. Right. You hear about it, and you say, I don't know.
I mean, even in my interviews with people on the street, when I say anything about the Clinton Foundation, people are shocked that you would criticize it because in their view, it's, they're helping AIDS. It's like, actually, Exactly.
Well, I mean, here in the city, you bring it up. I mean, the Clinton Foundation is fundamentally like that homeless foundation. They were homeless in 1998, right? They didn't have...
The Clintons?
They didn't own a home. Oh. And they needed to pay their legal bills, and they got to have 2 mansions. Right? You got to have one in D.C. and one in whatever state you're going to carpet bag your way into, New York. So they set up this charity, and I would argue it's akin to that New York homeless charity, which I remember years ago. You would go around, rich portions of the city, and there'd be one of those folding tables
with
out there,
huge fat guy
with a gigantic jar filled with pennies. And they would ask you, give me a penny for the homeless people. And you think to yourself, why are you asking for a penny? I mean, a lot of people would have to give you money. And then what did the truth turn out to be? A, there was no charity, kind of like the Clinton Foundation.
What was that thing called?
I forget.
Because there was a guy one time, he used to sit always outside Penn Station, and one day he had a credit card reader and an iPhone. And I was like, what kind of homeless guy has an iPhone?
Right. Yeah, but in this case, it turned out that the pranks, the fraudsters behind it would basically charge individuals a certain amount
to carry around that bucket.
To sit in, it was actually a folding table and a chair with this gigantic glass, big glass thing.
I remember it. I haven't seen it in years.
Well, it's a complete fraud. And so when, many charities actually go way above and beyond the call of duty, and really do good works. But we are a very generous nation. We give all in about $200 billion or so dollars a year to charities. And in fact, the poorest people among us give the most to charity as a percentage of their meager incomes. And so, there's a lot of good-hearted stuff going on. But then there's just this, how do you check it? I mean, we don't really have the IRS we saw in Lois Lerner. I would argue she's a despicable, unprosecuted criminal. Probably her husband is too. And there are probably a lot of people like her still in the IRS who haven't been rooted out yet. So if you defang the IRS, the federal tax service, and you defang the state services in the high tax states like New York and California and Illinois, what you have with a charity that can run riot like this Clinton Foundation and like some of the others is you have a perfect money laundering vehicle. And Inspector Chalandon asked me to remind everybody that even now, in this attempt to clean up for offshore bank accounts and stuff like that, the one loophole that has not yet been cleaned up is that international charities are not yet regulated in the tight way that individuals are and corporations are. So you set up a fake charity, and you now have a legitimate reason to wire transfer money abroad into
This
that
sounds to me like the reason why they're so ripe for theft.
Right. Exactly. It's a perfect, I mean, it's like that, I don't know if you remember Catch-22.
Yeah.
The
Joseph Heller.
I love the name of the guy who was the fixer, Milo Menderbender or whatever. That's who you have, Ira Magazine Minderbinder or whatever. You're putting this stuff together. You could set up these offices around the world that are collecting money, and
Right.
who knows what's really happening to it.
Right.
And then you can use it just the way the Templars did. In the Crusades, you have these affiliated offices. You go into one office and you say, I gave money in Burundi, for XYZ. Can I have a bit of it back here in the Cayman Islands? And you can shuffle money around that way, evading all the controls. And that's what I believe these people have been doing.
Wow.
For a long, long time. And we'll see some specific examples of why I suspect this.
All right. Well, without further ado, why
Sure.
don't we take a look at what will happen today?
All right. So we go to page 2.
Yes.
This, we'll breeze through this quickly, and I guess it's amazing, this computer gremlins, what actually happened, snuck in there, but...
What? Didn't we check this
I know,
thing?
we did. Those gremlins, they're everywhere.
How did that actually happen?
It doesn't matter. So, but for the new viewers in particular, we are doing this slightly differently than the mainstream press does it. What we do is we do our reporting exclusively from publicly available sources. We provide links to those sources. We encourage our viewers to check our work, see for themselves what we see with our own eyes, and understand with our own minds. And there's now, at this point, Jason, I think there's almost 65 hours of programming just on this issue of the Clinton Foundation and the various pieces. That's a lot of time.
It is.
No commercials. And each week we still have new things that we could talk about because it's such a complex fraud that it's amazing it isn't actually being prosecuted yet.
It's staggering, the research that you've done, Charles.
Well, thanks for letting me air it. But what we might hit here is this playlist.
Yes.
Jason has put up a special playlist link that for the new viewers is useful. I think it's...
There we go.
There we go, yeah. So I guess this says there are 49 videos. I don't understand why it says there's only 3,990 views. I think
that's talking about the playlist itself.
Oh, is that right? Jeez.
Yeah, because each of the videos have well over that amount.
Right.
But this playlist, it contains each of the videos. I believe I've got them in chronological order from newest to oldest, and so people can come right in here and just have themselves a Charles Orr telethon and watch each video consecutively.
This one is, I think, very popular.
You've got jail?
Yeah.
Yeah, people do.
I think that was, well, let's see how many views that was. 30,000 views,
yeah.
and that's almost 3 hours.
Yep, people like to...
I love that.
See,
I love the Jim Carrey face.
I tell you, it's amazing how many dopey pictures of Bill Clinton you can find if you go looking for them.
Yeah. So if we go back into page 2,
yes,
I think we could just rip right along into page 3. Mm-hmm. And This is an update. We won't go through every single one of these links, but viewers can do that at their own time. We provide these slides. They'll be up, I guess, later today.
And I should add, Charles, if there's ever a video in there that doesn't have the presentation linked, people can just email me on truth@crowdsourcethetruth.org, and I'll be sure to put it up there. I try to stay on top of that, but there's so many things to keep straight, it's sometimes tricky.
So the first link, actually, why don't we pull that one up? Now this is I think it's James Woolsey. Yeah, James Woolsey, who used to head up the CIA, saying in essence that U.S. meddling in foreign elections is a good idea. And I mean, you just, for somebody to say something that stupid and be the former head of Central Intelligence, the Central Lack of Intelligence Agency, you know, I'm told by a friend of his that you know, he's now on a second wife, and that person may not be helping him out too much. But now let us look at this. We don't do that now. We don't mess around in other people's elections. Here's the answer. Well, only for a very good cause in the interest of democracy. I mean,
oh my!
You got to just say, now wait a minute, right? We're running $1 trillion deficit. We have 17 intelligence agencies that we know about.
Right.
There could be others that we don't know about. And are we getting good intelligence? Are these people? The framers never, I think, countenance the idea that there would be a government above the level of the known government that would just be pulling strings and puppet mastering around the world, you know, subject to no review and with unlimited budgets, in an age where the tools of technology give such secret agencies tremendous leverage over the president himself, over the cabinet, over anybody with business interests. You know, and I think it's time to really have, we talked about this before, a grown-up discussion where we don't hear from any government person that, you know, you're not cleared to know about this. And we have this idiotic comment from a man who's, you know, supposed to be pretty smart. Right. On top of last week a development where I think in one court proceeding or another, it might have been with Judicial Watch, the CIA came back and said, we can't give you the information that we leaked to reporters. Okay, because it's too secret. I mean, huh?
That's
you
crazy.
leaked it to reporters, right?
That's crazy.
So this is just preposterous. I mean, we either we can't have a one-way street here. Well, we can meddle in everybody else's elections, but they can't meddle in ours. I mean, it's either a good thing or a bad thing not to meddle in foreign elections, and I think it's a bad thing.
I agree with that. You know, it's interesting, Charles. Also, we've had in the past week multiple CIA whistleblowers on this show. Well, not on the Sunday with Charles show, right, but on Crowdsource the Truth. We started with Harmon Wilfred, who told us about how as a contractor in the CIA, his life was basically ruined. And then later in the week, we had Kevin Shipp on, who spoke about how the CIA tried to poison him, and he's published a book that goes into great detail about some of his experiences with CIA. So it's interesting to see these whistleblowers come forward and what they have to say.
Now, here's pretty interesting here. This is a list of the elections in which we meddled.
Oh boy.
Starting in 2016.
U.S.? Oh.
Yeah. Look at this. Since 1948. Just a few.
Wow. Oh my. Look at that.
And this isn't exhaustive. They left out, there's Honduras. There's, you know, we started with that.
This looks like a couple per year. Venezuela. Yeah. Who provided this list? Zero Hedge or the CIA? Okay.
I guess Yogi Chan, whoever that is.
Right.
And I don't think that's an exhaustive list by any stretch of the imagination.
So you've got 4chan, you've got 8chan, and you've got Yogi Chan.
Yogi Bear Chan.
Yeah.
So we go back into the body there.
Yes.
Please. We can hit the second link if it's okay. That's Donald Trump's tweet. We won't do all of them. I just love the way the guy spells little.
Did he misspell it?
No, he does this on purpose. He did this the same way with little Bob Corker. The leaking monster of no control.
I'm sure I've told you about the time I ran into Adam Schiff on a train. He was just one of the weirdest people I've ever spoken to.
Yeah.
Very nervous and cagey.
Yeah, and it's as if, I mean, the way the Democrats behave in the minority in the House is if, the president is not the legitimate ruler of the country, and, unless they have their say, then nothing's going to happen correctly. They're going to obstruct. I think, we really have to look at what's happened in the last, whatever it is now, year or longer, where there's been a chorus from the mainstream media and the Democrats that there's been a gigantic amount of, in quotes, collusion, not a crime actually, collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians, and now, bupkis.
Well, isn't it just a vague term, collusion? I mean, obviously they colluded to somehow fix the election. That would be a crime, but there's just no evidence of it. Everything they keep fishing for is...
Well, I mean, the clinical way to do this, I think, I'm kind of a numbers guy, would be to say, all right, the resistance started when? November 9th. Okay, let's look at November 9th to January 20th, and let's look and see how much money was spent by the Clinton campaign, by the Democratic Party, and I hope not, but by the US government, to engender this resistance, including the recounts, the demonstrations, and all that kind of stuff. How much money went in that time period? How much money went, let's say, between May 17th or thereabouts, whenever it was that Trump became likely, and that Singer dropped away from funding the work that he had been doing for the Republican Never Trumpers. Let's look at that period to November 9th, and then let's look at the Singer expenditures, and let's say, okay, what did Singer spend money on? Mm-hmm. What happened in that feverish period before the election? What were they spending money on then, and what happened afterwards? And let's get really upfront and personal with the journalists and find out how many journalists were paid off as a result of this, especially in the mainstream, either directly as payments direct to them or to their girlfriends or boyfriends or multiple mistresses, whatever. We need to have a detailed accounting of that $12 million.
They're never going to tell you.
Well, it's not a question of telling. I mean, there's Guantanamo's open.
Open for business. You know what I wanted to ask you, Charles? What happened with Adam Schiff's counter memo that was supposedly so...
I was like...
explosive.
So what happened is he put this memo out there that
deliberately included classified information so that it would make Trump look bad for saying you can't release it.
Right, and then so Trump said redo the memo, and Schiff said I'm not redoing the memo, and so there it sits in limbo.
No memo.
No memo.
But now he uses that as a talking point to say, like, oh, look, this is not transparency. He released the Nunes memo. They basically said, don't release the Nunes memo because it's going to, methods and sources and whatever. And they released it, and it basically just said, these guys have no evidence, and they tried to blackmail Carter Page or whatever.
Well, who's that guy who's out there with card tables in front of Trump Tower and up and down Fifth Avenue talking about, crazy conspiracy theories?
I don't know.
He's a former... he ran for president. Anyway, there's some people like Adam Schiff is one of those people. I mean, he can make any argument sound plausible to the dedicated never Trumper, anti-Trumper partisans. He'll say something. It's just total. He'll lie his head off.
We talking about what's his name? Lyndon LaRouche.
Bingo.
There you go.
There you go.
Hard to remember. Hard to remember.
So. If we hit this where you just are, this zero hedge one, not that one.
That one?
Yeah. So interestingly, starting Saturday night, Trump is beginning to accentuate his negative tweets against the FBI and also this H.R. McMaster. Now, I have never liked H.R. McMaster. I don't know any of these people personally, but I've never liked his attitude, his approach. He strikes me as a prototypical deep state operative, and I never understood why Trump cozied up to him so much and relied on him so much. And I think what we have here, there are many, many wonderful people in the FBI. Sadly, a lot of them have left, like Robin Gritz and others we're going to talk about. But we have too many people, I think, in the top ranks of the FBI who likely were inserted, and in the deep state, inserted in the 8 long years when Barack Obama was president. And you're not dealing with like 6 people. You're dealing with perhaps hundreds, if not thousands of people whose motives are suspect.
Well, Robin said 20 or 30 that she was aware of. But of course, she's just one former agent. So
right, and you don't know. I mean, and this, and let's not forget that Mueller was in the role of head of the FBI for 12 years. I mean,
that's a long time, by the way, for that role, isn't it?
Exactly. It's supposed to be one 10-year term.
How did he do that for 12 years?
Well, I don't know. He passed the election. It's interesting. So he would have been, he should have been out of there prior to the 2012 election. And a cynic might say that the reason he was extended past the election was he could be counted on not to let the cats out of the bag as to what really happened in Benghazi, what really happened in Uranium One, et cetera. Anything that might make it more difficult for Barack Obama to get reelected. And I think, it's something, we're here now tipping around the edges of what I think is certainly the largest unprosecuted set of charity frauds, arguably the largest unprosecuted set of political crimes, obstruction of justice,
in
and mayhem
history,
in world history.
Yes.
And if we're going to investigate this, the investigator should not have the remotest taint associated with him. And I think, you're just talking about team taint here. I mean, you got Mueller, you got Comey, dopey James Comey, you got Rosenstein, you got now Wray with, collateral.
Well, I particularly dislike Mueller because he was appointed FBI director 1 week before 9/11 and was complicit in suppressing Bob Graham's 28-page report about Saudi Arabian financing and assistance to the 19 hijackers. I don't know that he's ever explained why he did that. And just real quickly before we get off of McMaster, he replaced Michael Flynn, right?
Right.
So, I mean, that's obviously a deep state insert right there. They did not want Flynn in there, who was doing all kinds of things to reveal crimes of the deep state.
Right, and so the deep state has been out of control, and we say by deep state we mean, I think, the 17 known security agencies and then maybe others and the people who feed off them.
Well, the corporations, I think, that rely on these services, like in other words, Boeing, Raytheon, the military-industrial complex, the technocratic complex is part of this now, Palantir and all these things that Quinn Michaels has been telling us about. These guys all rely on there being war and chaos and mayhem, and you need to buy guns and bullets and bombs.
Yeah, and on that one, again, another grown-up discussion. I mean, I buy the argument that our military, we haven't been spending that much money in recent decades. But on the other hand, let's look and see how much money, let's have somebody, objective, go and estimate how much money is spent around the world in total on defense spending. And when I see the numbers for the United States approaching $1 trillion, and you start looking at the number of sorties we've done versus other countries on different metrics, we spend an enormous amount of money on this defense establishment. We are less than 5% of the world's population, and we are also heavily in debt. So we need to, I think, before we start debating whether it needs a 2%, 3%, so many ship navy or whatever, we ought to have a real discussion about why are we spending so much money? And, surely there must be some way to achieve economies. I remember, won't give away which one, but I was doing some work with a railroad company, and they're complex, and it's not the one you're thinking of. So the new CEO of that railroad company thought it would be a brilliant idea to bring in a general and to run the railroad. And I told the guys, listen, that's not a smart idea, because what they're going to do is they're accustomed to, if you go into battle, you're going to ask for 10 times the number of troops that you really need, because people die if you get it wrong. In business, you don't need to have that much redundancy. Right. And sure enough, that approach did not work in that railroad. So there needs to be a real discussion about this.
Jan Weinberg and I did another Audacity Files episode yesterday, and he spoke quite a bit about who were the top contractors to the Department of Defense and the amounts of money that were being spent and all that kind of thing. And earlier in the week, we had John Cullen on, who's done some of the most compelling research into the October 1st Las Vegas shooting, and he presented, I feel, a very well-supported theory that the Saudi Arabian Air National Guard participated in or perpetrated that attack. And he shows videos from the U.S. military about how we're building up the Saudi Arabian Air National Guard. And as you and I have discussed in the past, the petrodollar situation that was created by Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger in 1973 mandates that the U.S. provides military support to Saudi Arabia in order to keep every country around the world buying and selling oil for U.S. dollars. I think that's the reason why we're so super militarized. Henry Kissinger came up with this Ponzi scheme where we can essentially print unlimited money, but we just need everybody to keep using dollars to buy oil. And the second anybody says, hey, why don't we use euros or yuan or gold, that person gets killed in a hot minute. So that's what happened.
We won't suggest that.
What's that?
We won't suggest that, therefore.
Sorry.
So let's go back into the old
Yeah.
body here. And all right, if we pull up the Mueller indictment, this is worth reading. We're not going to go through it now, but, and I hate to use the phrase nothing burger.
There's the 13 Russians.
Yeah, but we will get to, in the end of the broadcast, towards the end, we're going to get to those code statutes. It happens that I've selected some of those for review against the Clinton Foundation.
Ah.
But this is a long indictment, principally of Russian-controlled companies and Russian individuals, alleging that these people interfered in the election. And without going into the gory details, for me, I mean, the plot here, in theory, starts in 2014. One wonders if that's really the truth. We've talked in the past about Anna Chapman and the catching of the Russian spies and then the quick release between June 27, 2010 and early July 2010. You know, I wonder how far back this plot goes. I note that it doesn't involve a tremendous amount of money, unless I'm misreading it. I thought I saw $1.25 million as a number that was floated. I don't know if that was for 1 month or the whole conspiracy. We are talking about minimal spending. Now, maybe these Facebook ads are incredibly effective, but I mean, the total amount of money that was spent by campaigns on advertising, I want to say it was more like, you know, in the $2, $3, $4, $5 billion area, all in.
Right.
This is
A couple of rubles on Facebook ads shouldn't really have an impact.
Right, and you know, so this may not be the final step in Mueller's campaign here, and maybe there are big shoes going to drop after this one, but this did not seem to me to be overly persuasive. Justifying this extraordinary investigation with Mueller as a special counsel, with all these Democrat donors, Clinton allies on his staff, you know, filing this lawsuit against, I think, people who live in Russia, and good luck getting them out of Russia, and good luck bringing these Russian companies to justice in the United States,
right,
doesn't really seem to me as, you know, an excellent use of resources. And I've been told by people who are familiar with the criminal justice prosecution system that, you know, ordinarily they sit around a table and they say, look, a lot of people we could prosecute, but let's use our scarce resources to the most telling effect. And I don't see this as being all that telling.
So you think this is kind of like a nothing pierogi?
Is pierogi Ukrainian, right? Or is that Russian?
Oh, you might be right, but sorry.
Or Polish even. So if we go back into it, we have here, you know, we won't pull up the link, but we have Rosenstein saying the Russians did not alter the outcome of the election. And it's really, I think, insulting to the remaining intelligence of the American voter to believe that, you know, we didn't have in this country passionate interest in Bernie Sanders. You started out being interested in Bernie Sanders, passionate interest in Trump. And as far as Hillary was concerned, it was like, do I have to? You know?
There are people who are passionate about Hillary.
Yeah.
They're misguided. But
I mean, I wonder if Mark Visvinsky actually voted. You know? I mean,
for mom-in-law.
I mean, but there was I just say it because it just, and I know it's just my personal experience, but walking around where I live in New York, in the West Village, in 2008, for weeks before the election campaign, every brownstone, every store had Barack Obama, you know, pictures and posters and buttons and
change logo
and open change and all that kind of stuff. And there was euphoria the night, you know, leading up into it. It was like a party celebration.
Yeah.
In the same places, you know, where you would expect. Hillary had a lot of supporters, particularly among, you know, the portions of the West Village that's more gay and lesbian. She had a lot of supporters, but there were, you know, no posters, no buttons, no enthusiasm. And when I saw that, I said, I think there's a little bit of a problem here. You know, you think back to her, how many different times did she announce that she was running for president? The reboot over at Welfare Island was not such a great idea. You know, where they had tons of extra TV screens, and they, you know, made it incredibly complicated to get over there because they didn't want, you know, antagonists over there, and very few people showed up. You know, and then her crowds and the rallies, Trump he'd go to the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin, and Hillary wouldn't even go to Wisconsin. She'd go to Wisconsin Avenue in Washington, D.C., but not out into Wisconsin, and wonder, why did I lose Wisconsin?
Yeah. Well, when they would show Bernie like in L.A. at the Staples Center, it was like Kanye West or something. You know, the place was packed, and everybody, even birds were coming in there. And Hillary was like giving a speech to the PTA committee or something, just like sitting
on policy.
Around. Yeah.
Right? And then, you know, there's this whole thing, this Zero Hedge article is very funny, that Hillary Clinton campaigned. Oh, that's weird. Yeah, there you go. I mean, just because you spend money on advertising doesn't mean you're going to sell a product, service, or a candidate. And
well, but I have another question. Isn't it completely legitimate, like if I want to do business with a Russian company, and let's say I want to put an ad on VK.com that says, you know, let's say they have somebody running for president in Russia that you and I disagree with, isn't it totally legitimate to do business with a company in Russia and just put our political views in an ad and say vote? That's not meddling with the election.
I don't know the answer to that question. In Russia, I don't know what Russian law is.
Okay, but in the U.S., for Russia to buy an ad on Facebook and say, hey, Hillary Clinton wants to create a war in Syria, don't vote for her, that's a legitimate ad that they could place, right?
I don't know the answer to that question, actually. It depends, because I think campaign spending is defined in certain ways. And if you are a foreign actor, foreign, which is either a government or a foreign-controlled company, and as the advertising agency here in the United States, as the company you're doing that work, if you're acting on behalf of a foreign, you've got to register.
So isn't it Facebook that should be in trouble?
No, Facebook deserves to be in trouble. But I mean, no amount of advertising is going to sell a pig. And it's just not going to work. You know, it's like, remember when they were trying to sell a pig in Indonesia, and a Russian company was trying to sell pork products in Indonesia,
and they didn't realize that
it was
Muslim.
No, and Putin himself just burst out laughing. You can't do that. It's a Muslim country. I mean, it's the same idea. It's not going to work here.
That's pretty funny.
I mean, in this country, I would argue that the established parties, both of them, are on their way out, and because of technology, despite the groupthink on campuses, I think people are starting to really think for themselves. And this was old Coke. It just didn't. I like old Coke, but you know, the soft drink. But this is old Coke on Coke.
When they had new Coke, they came out and everyone was like, "What are you doing? Go back to the classic."
Right. I mean, but this is old Coke on Coke. I mean, this did not work.
Oh, Mrs. Clinton. You know, I heard a rumor that she's going to run again in 2020, and I really hope she does, because I'd like to watch her lose again.
Exactly. So we go back. And we don't need to pull this up because we just talked about it, but don't you think in hindsight, as you think back to her performance, she ran as if she knew she was going to win the primaries and she knew she was going to win the general election. Now, does that strike you is a bit odd in hindsight, given what we now see is this orchestrated resistance movement, the defanging of the FBI when it comes to investigating Hillary Clinton, the energizing the FBI when it comes to going against Donald Trump. Doesn't it strike you as actually, the real thing to investigate here is collusion of the Obama administration with the Clinton campaign using federal resources,
Department of Justice,
to encourage Trump to be the nominee, thinking they could cut him off at the knees in the general campaign. That to me, if you're going to get into conspiracy theories, that would seem to be a conspiracy theory where there's a lot of legs to it.
Well, and wasn't there an email in WikiLeaks sent by the Podfather, or someone sent to the Podfather, talking about a Pied Piper strategy where they're going to get everybody to follow Trump and then
kneecap him?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I guess that didn't happen.
That didn't work so well now. Speaking of the Podfather and his brother, we haven't heard much from him. Huh?
That is curious. I wonder.
Oh, that's McCabe.
That's McCabe getting ready to go. The Podfather mug is over there in the dishwasher. But I'm glad you brought that up. I'll remind everyone where they can get wonderful Podfather mugs and Andrew McCabe in jail mugs by the end of the show.
Yeah, so if we go to the next slide. All right, we've been through this in gory detail, and there are many presentations, so I'm going to go very quickly into this. And I bring this up for the benefit of the government of Austria, government of the United Kingdom, and the government of Canada. People in your investigative bureaus may not necessarily be aware of the strict rules that do apply to U.S. charities operating internationally. But and I didn't want to make this a very lengthy presentation. I could go on for probably 100 pages if I needed to.
I have no doubt.
But just the quick things that you should find that you won't find. They did not file a tax return for the period October 23, 1997 to December 31st, 1997. You have to do that. And they didn't do that. That means their tax returns are open to the very beginning, no statute of limitations. You screwed up bigly. Beginning in 1998, maybe earlier, they started this pig, I would call it, in Skip Rutherford's house, 5604 Hawthorne Drive in Little Rock, okay? And the way charities work to try to police this normally, you have to select a registered office. You can't then have all these unregistered offices over here where you're actually doing the work and you keep, your records are supposed to be in the registered office, and you're supposed to declare in many of these states all of your offices so that the regulators can say, wait a minute, the Clinton Foundation doesn't have an office over there.
Yeah.
So what do they keep in their books and records there? Why are they asking me to send money there? They began doing that in 1998. And like any sloppy Clinton project, they thought they'd be super careful and they would lie about where they registered. So on the tax forms for the IRS, you're supposed to list the states where you're required to register for soliciting in advance and where you did register. And so they put in 98, in 99, in 2000 they answer none. But in the fine print, there's a line in other for each of those years that says they spent money on registrations. So when I saw that back in February, March of 2015, I said, this is going to be a big project. It's going to take a lot of time, but I'm going to have to go through every single state of the union and see where they actually registered. So I didn't do it alone.
But wait, if they said none...
They lied to the IRS.
So that's what I mean. It's like a contradiction within the document. You don't even really need to look any further.
Well, you do. I mean, so they just assume, the way they game the system is they say, we'll solve this problem. We've got Lois Lerner. We'll put her in the IRS. Then we don't have a problem, right? Somebody complains, Lerner says, that's not a problem. Anyway, so I knew it would be laborious, and I think a number of people have gone through this with me, and I think we have gotten information from 41 different states. And we are putting together, FBI if you're listening, and U.S. attorneys and others, we're putting together a long litany of examples where the president of the Clinton Foundation, the second dean of the Clinton School of Public Service, and the trustee and alternately the treasurer and the first dean of the Clinton School of Public Service, they have a special curriculum over there in lying and cover-up lies, because these gentlemen have their signatures on multiple fake registration forms, which are all in error, which have been by definition sent across state lines because they went from Little Rock to the state of South Carolina and New York and California. And they didn't think anybody would ever do this, but you can put that all back together in a chronology, and you could say, all right, this is what you're supposed to do. You knew better. You're a former senator. You're a former, I think, governor or senior guy in prior. Rutherford, you're a former political hack, current political hack. And I think he was head of the Clinton School of Public Service for a while.
Public disservice.
That's right. You should have known better. So there's a long, complex chronology. There's no way you could say it happened by accident, because you have to. All of these forms, typically you're swearing out under penalties, state penalties of perjury, and of course the federal forms, the IRS, federal forms of perjury. And we're only on point 2 now.
Yeah.
Okay. So this disqualifying compliance defects, that's Bill Clinton lying under oath, obstructing justice, and there are multiple instances of it. When you go into the torture timeline of what he did in the Paula Jones case, the number of times that a court or disciplinary body cited him for this is extensive. And he very clearly takes credit for running the foundation. He is by definition a key person. And all of those defects, lying under oath, obstructing justice, are defects that would be relevant to a donor if you're trying to say, well, do I trust this team to take my shekels and send them over there to, to Africa? How can I trust a team that's got, liar, liar, pants on fire accountant and these crooked trustees, no books and records, no audits, and on top of which we've got Bill Clinton in trouble for impeached, not convicted, and also disciplinary actions against him multiple times. None of this is disclosed in any forms, nor is the nature of his exact relationship to the Clinton Foundation spelled out properly.
Well, but of course he boasts about being a key principal guy there.
Right. And so in point 4, there are multiple examples of the Clinton Foundation that we found so far in Mississippi 3 separate times between, I think, 1999 and 2003, 3 separate instances of them being sanctioned by the state of Mississippi. Now, why is that significant? Because most states, most serious states that regulate this stuff, they want to know every place that you've already been sanctioned and why. So they actually lie in the report to Mississippi about the sanctions that are against the Mississippi, imposed on them, because there's 2 separate people. They're dealing with the Secretary of State over here, Attorney General over here. Evidently, those people didn't talk to each other.
Yeah, I was going to say, the states can't find, they have to ask the Clintons. There's no...
And then on top of that, there's also, these people managed to use a firm that's now got a different name, O'Brien, McConnell, and Pearson, that they used them from 2002 to 2002, and O'Brien, McConnell, and Pearson were off soliciting on behalf of the Clinton Foundation and other places. They got caught in Pennsylvania.
Aren't they lawyers? Why are they soliciting?
No, it's a fundraising group. And the interesting thing, the connections that are not made here, which need to be made by the FBI, hello, the FBI, listen up. You got to go and you got to say, in the case of O'Brien, McConnell, and Pearson, how much work did O'Brien, McConnell, and Pearson do for Hillary Clinton's first senatorial campaign? Because they do charity fundraising and political fundraising. For her second, for her presidential campaigns, how much work did they do? And did, check the flows of those monies, right? Were they overbilling the charity to underbill the campaign or vice versa? In addition, in this David Pryor thing, was not mentioned here, he, in 1998, led the campaign to run the second presidential legal expense trust thing. I think there are all kinds of legal problems with that. I don't understand why the monies raised for that legal expense bill were not income to the Clintons. Mm-hmm. I don't understand how in 1998, a year where there was so much publicity, with a straight face, these guys claim that they only received 3 donations for the library, 3. But they received thousands for the Presidential Expense Trust. Of course, the books aren't available for that. We don't know what offices they were using, what accountants they were using. In certain states, we have evidence in Maryland, they claimed that thing was a charity, and it's not a charity. I mean, all of these things, we're just now here in the very early period, are things that the FBI from 2001 to 2005 either investigated and didn't find, which is amazing.
Pretty bad. Yeah.
Or investigated and found and decided that they weren't important. But
Worse.
they should have found this stuff back in 2001 and 2005. And I don't know who investigates the FBI. I don't know if there's who.
I think it should be you.
Well, I'm busy.
Hey, that's true.
So on point 5, they have never, in any year, we've talked about this, they have never obtained a legally compliant financial audit from a truly independent firm. Never once. Especially in 2004, the year where they built this stupid massage parlor in Little Rock, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. The most important thing you can do when you've got you complete a construction project is to figure out the value of what you built. It's not worth $165 million because you spent $165 million on it. Somebody's got to look at it and say, this is what this thing is really worth. And you got to have a report from some real expert. Not the construction firm that built it, because of course they're going to say it's $165 million. Pay me $165 million. That's what.
By the way, where's the balance?
Right. You got to have something real, and they never got that. In any of these important years, and it's not like this is all that complicated. We're going to be talking about a complicated entity at the end of the show, This is pretty simple and small.
Right.
So why would you never have a real audit? Why would you use multiple different accounting firms? This whatever it is, BKD and Price Waterhouse, now Cohn Resnick, and the other firms around the periphery of this thing. Nobody
Coie.
noticed.
Perkins Coie, right?
That's a law firm.
Oh, but they don't have anything to do with this?
Not so much with this.
They're like buying dossiers and
That's
things
exactly.
like that.
They're busy doing that. And then, by 2002, we're going to show you that they began unauthorized international operations in 2002. Mm-hmm. Now, that's very dangerous stuff. The IRS writes these rules, and maybe it's like other situations, you write the rules down, but then you game the prosecutor so you never worry about breaking the law. But you're not supposed to operate a U.S. tax-exempt charity internationally unless you control it. Because the people who understand this are smart enough to say that you set something up in Little Rock that now is going to be
some other country
in a private jet, Epstein's jet, around the world, with a big cargo hold filled with who knows what. You got to control that. You got to make sure that it isn't just a laundry. Right. And there's a list we've talked about in the past. There's a list of red flags for fraud, and this is one of them. When you have complex international operations with it's unclear they have the legal authority they didn't have the legal authority to do any of this. That's a problem. And then by 2004, maybe sooner, I suspect in 2002 they did open an office in the Bahamas, and possibly also in St. Lucia. We haven't been able to prove that yet, but FBI, hello, you could do something about this. You could figure this out. Go down to Nassau. I've sent somebody to Nassau, and I can tell you, they had eyes on a large file but were only given papers for the period 2010 forward on Clinton Health Access Initiative. This was before the election, when I think the Bahamians expected Hillary to win, and we nearly got the papers, but they pulled him back. So FBI, you've got people in the Bahamas, walk into the corporate registry and ask for all records pertaining to the Clinton Foundation going back to 2002. You will find them.
I've been seeing calls for Wray to resign as a result of this Florida shooting. Doesn't it seem like it's probably more negligence on the part of the previous administration of the FBI than the guy who's been there for 2 or 3 months? How long has Wray been the director of the FBI?
Not long. But the thing about Wray I have enormous admiration for Sidney Powell, this lady who wrote License to Lie, and she is very negative on Wray. And she is an accomplished lawyer, worked in the Department of Justice, saw the wrong side of the administration of law. If she's got a problem with Wray, I got a problem with Wray.
We've heard a lot of people who have had problems with Wray. He was involved in the Enron investigation, which was obviously a Bush-fueled disaster. And he fired McCabe. I like that. We'll have to see what he does.
So starting in 7, they began opening these unregistered international offices. The one that you want to focus on, there's one in India, there's one in South Africa, there's one, I believe, in Uganda, and there could be others in the Dominican Republic, around the world. So you set up these offices that become collection points for grants, and if you don't have tight controls and you don't have a real auditor and you don't have independent trustees, those foreign offices can be vehicles to transmit dirty money into political campaigns, to bribe people. And I, for the life of me, do not understand why the Attorney General of Arkansas, Leslie Rutledge, with this fact set, has not been all over this for a long time. So there's another set of issues which has to be, why haven't the Attorney Generals, Leslie and her predecessor, been on this case for a long time? By not acting, they've allowed it to mushroom. So starting in 2004, on line 8, they began to make false and materially misleading applications for federal tax exemption for new entities. They started with the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative. There is a record in the IRS that the FBI should be able to get of that application, whether it was approved, if it was turned down, when it was turned down, what the correspondent. They should be able to get all this. And mind you, in 2004, Dopey James Comey and Mueller, were connected to the investigation that was open at this time. So, you got to ask some very serious questions about this thing was formed March 24th, 2004, just as the same guy, Skip Rutherford, who likes unregistered offices, who got a personal benefit out of this, being the paid dean of the Clinton School of Public Service. Who knows, he got a pension or whatever else. He's sending false and material, lying letters to our own National Archives, misrepresenting the true state of the foundation, to the House, to the Senate, and basically giving our National Archives a poison chalice in a partial interest in this massage parlor complex out in Little Rock with debt on it and all sorts of other problems and legal problems. And, they've been trying to bury and hide that failure, and we've chronicled before numerous examples of new false and materially misleading applications for federal tax exemption. We don't know yet. And the FBI, are you listening? You need to get the Arkansas files. When did the Clinton Foundation apply for Arkansas state tax exemption, and what did they say they were going to be?
Both Laura Loomer and Robin Gritz have raised concerns about the field office director, the SAC in charge in Little Rock.
Yeah, well, then let's have people from New York or someplace you can trust, Montana or somewhere. There's got to be some special agent in charge who is...
Special agent in charge.
So on 10, they used, where you get trapped in federal crime, they used false and materially misleading solicitation materials over the mail, over telephones, over the internet, across state lines, inside the U.S. and outside the U.S. These are each request. You do a 1,000,000-piece mailing. That's 1,000,000 counts.
Wow.
Right? Here we're going to be later, a second talking about this CHI, which we've been over before. They had an old entity that they called the acronym CHI.
Yeah.
And then they created a new entity and they called the acronym CHI to disguise, I think, the very profound differences between the old and the new one. But when they reorganized this CHI late in 2009, it was a complete shambles, and there's a record of it. It is boldly in violation of the law. So the question there is not, is this illegal? Of course it's illegal. The real questions are, why did Lois Lerner allow this to proceed from 2009 until she was thrown the hell out of the IRS in May of 2013 or after May 2013?
Charles, I find it very interesting because, you're talking about tactics and techniques, the names that look the same but are different, that are deliberate techniques to distract and part of a disinformation campaign to allow this to go. I mean, sorry if this seems self-serving, but I noticed that they're really identical to the tactics being used by the individuals that are trying to destroy the reputation of Crowdsource the Truth. They'll rename their Twitter accounts and put up graphics from Crowdsource the Truth, put out bad information so that now when you go do Google searches for my name and for Crowdsource the Truth, you're coming to this idiotic information that's intended to defame me. As a matter of fact, there was someone else I spoke about. Oh yes, two guests who didn't want to appear with each other because one guy said, oh, I don't know, that guy got caught lying. And then without telling the other guest told me, there was a while where someone was impersonating me on Twitter and damaged them, not me, but this guest. Right. So it's a known technique that we see, scam artists exercising.
Yeah. Well, this is number 12 for those of you in foreign governments in Austria and Germany and Australia and the UK and France. Number 12 is a very important one. On the 2nd of November 2013, the trustees, the dopey trustees of the Clinton Foundation, allowed the Clinton family to attempt to steal control of a public charity, concentrating power in the hands of what are called Class A directors, naming themselves, Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea, as Class A directors. You can't do that. But they did, in fact, do that, and then, of course, they couldn't tell anybody before the election, so what did they do? They tried to hide it. So they've told certain states, Georgia is one that looked at this and said, hey, hang on, you can't do that. And so the Clinton Foundation gave Georgia a forged letter from the IRS that is just on its face, you could tell it's a forgery. I'm not an expert on this kind of stuff, but you just look, it's not an IRS stationery.
Wow.
So, and it says, oh no, everything's fine, and it's got some fake name on it. So this is a major problem. And you people in the UK, you're giving, through Unitate, you're giving hundreds of millions of dollars towards this charity, and through the Department for international development. France, same thing. Australia, 100. Norway. How come you didn't see this? Do you have no lawyers over there in these countries? Could you not afford to pay a U.S. lawyer to do like an hour's worth of work?
Well, Charles, people in the Periscope comments want to know if you've tried the iced venti chai.
Ixnay. English breakfast tea with 3 honeys.
There you go.
So number 13 there, under some of the tougher state laws, when you have what's an adverse change, a material adverse change, a negative development, like, for example, the FBI is investigating you.
That's not good.
That's not good. Or the IRS is investigating you. In New York, you have to provide to New York copies of communication with the IRS, which they had never done. Of course, why not? Because you've got crooked Eric Schneiderman in charge, Attorney General here in New York, and it's a Democratic-controlled state, and they're not going to, they don't seem to have the appetite to investigate the Clintons and apply justice inside the state of New York evenly. No, they'd rather persecute Donald Trump, a man who's created a lot of jobs here in New York City, and throughout the state, and let the Clintons, carpetbaggers from Arkansas, continue to operate a slime factory in Chappaqua and down in Washington, D.C.
Do you know that if you go over to Trump Tower on 50 whatever right now and speak to even the people sweeping the floor, they all have good things to say about Donald Trump?
I'm sure that's true. So the one thing people who are watching this broadcast involved with governments, and I happen to know that there are some very serious government authorities, I happen to know about it, who are watching this, you need to understand that the donors and the professional advisors to this criminal conspiracy have exposure, right? The people who've given money, the private foundations have given money, the governments have given money to engender this fraud, the accountants, the law firms, the consultants, the fundraising agents, all of those people have legal liability.
Right.
And I'm not a lawyer, but I'm told it can be quite serious in financial terms. The trustees, whatever you want to call them, directors or trustees of these entities, are in deep trouble because you cannot use this charity to pay your bills, to defend yourself against the charges that surely are going to come here.
Why have none of those people come forward and emailed you on charlesortel.com or me on truth@crowdsourcethetruth.org to be able to share some information and maybe get out in front of this? We could put them in touch with the right people at the FBI and the various investigators around the world that you're dealing with.
See, the problem with this is, and why I latched onto this in the beginning, for those people, they are a member of the pull the pin and eat this grenade club. I mean, there's no way, you won't have any assurance when you come forward that, this Corinne Brown, for an $800,000 charity fraud, age 71, is in federal prison for 5 years. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars here. We're talking about rich people with other problems, probably. They come forward,
But can't they be a whistleblower and make a deal with somebody?
You'll get lenience. I could understand if good lawyers are inherently very cautious. And so, you're a billionaire and you go to your lawyer and you say, this charity, my wife got me involved with over here. I don't like what I'm hearing.
Maybe move to Brunei.
Yeah, exactly. I think I might volunteer for that SpaceX flight to Mars.
Right, exactly. One-way ticket.
Yeah. So if we go to the next page, all right, I know people don't like it when I read, but I'm going to have to do this. I'm not going to do it in Bill Clinton's voice, but this is actually something that somebody wrote under Bill's name. There's another way young people can give money that I really like. Selling a product or service for a good cause. Well, let's just stop right there. Selling a product or service is not charity.
Right.
Okay? This kind of giving goes on all over America every day. Kids' lemonade stands, student car washes, and old-fashioned pie suppers in small communities. Now, I have yet to go to an old-fashioned pie supper.
Bill Clinton's a pie expert, from what I've heard.
Yeah. All raise funds for worthy local projects. Now, this is, I was reading this, I think, in a coffee shop for the first time, and I nearly spit my coffee all over the table. When I was in politics in Arkansas, one mandatory annual appearance for every politician in the state was the Gillette Coon Supper. This is his writing, which always drew 1,500 or more people to a town of 800 in the rice country of southeastern Arkansas.
Wow.
The local high school always fielded a good football team, but it was too small to afford one. So the budget gap was filled when a crowd twice as large as the local population actually paid good money to eat barbecued raccoon.
That's your favorite.
Well, you got to have the hot sauce. The only hot sauce.
Oh, in the purse. In the purse.
It's an experience everyone ought to have once in a lifetime, so long as there's plenty of barbecue sauce to make the coon meat edible. Now,
I can't believe he's saying that.
I mean, this is on page 28 of a book. He makes supposedly $6.4 million writing this book. And if you think, wait a minute, this guy was president of the United States? I mean,
Bill Clinton's roadkill recipes?
Right. Are you going to write a book about this? and get 6.4 million giving away this secret?
Oh my God.
You know? And this is America's first black president? You're selling roadkill?
It's crazy.
For charity?
Totally
But you know,
crazy.
that's in essence what these people have been doing. They've been selling roadkill to make themselves rich, right? Telling stories. Probably somebody else wrote the book, you know, Justin Cooper, one of those people, and he just, let's throw in the Gillette coon. Should I keep that story in, boss? Yeah, keep it in. Why not?
Well, selling roadkill gave them the business model for Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign.
Exactly. Now, we won't pull all this up because it'll take too much time, but here we've given certain examples. If we can just go back to the actual slide.
Oh, sorry.
These are recent stories, reasonably recent stories, about, you know, the gay men's health crisis started out, it was, I think, one of the first
AIDS
HIV,
charity, yeah.
And there's a distinction between that.
Actually, their office is very close to where we are right now. I've walked by it several times.
Right, and it's very controversial. So
Why?
there are people who believe it is it's a party, it's all about parties, and it's a fraud, and this and that. And there's been that's an article that
It's a fancy building, actually.
right.
that
They
it's
own
in.
it. You see, and so what happens with some of these popular crises, the gay men's, is a compelling crisis actually. Back in the 90s in particular, when the medicine was so expensive,
Right.
when it was thought the disease would spread throughout the poorest places in the world, there was no way to stop it.
Right.
I mean, it was a heart-wrenching saga. Oxfam, the charity, is in the press that they were using Haitian aid workers as prostitutes, and now people are resigning right and left, or forced resignations in the UK.
Really?
But this is, I remember anytime you hear about these international rescue programs, if you've ever had any experience in a very poor country, you have to understand it. It's not like you can wave a magic wand, as we in theory tried to do in Haiti, throw a whole bunch of money into I won't use the phrase, a certain kind of hole. Country that doesn't have electricity, doesn't have clean water, doesn't have roads, doesn't have police, doesn't have
Well, it's
law.
Haiti again. They keep taking advantage of Haiti.
Right, but this is, here's Oxfam, which otherwise had a decent reputation until this happened. If you go back into the slides, there's another story about UNICEF. You don't have to hit it up but then there's the one I would like to hit up, the International Rescue Committee, which has Mr. Soras, and this I went to one benefit for this thing, and I remember just listening to it and saying, this does not add up for me. So you have these places where experts on human trafficking will tell you that when there is a disruption, refugee crisis or whatever, that's when kids are abducted. So, the traffickers love this type of approach. They like to insinuate themselves into these charities. They go to places where there's displacement with the evil goal of trafficking in humans.
So Syria, any of that type of thing, when you hear about refugees, there's also human trafficking basically going on.
So, and then if we go back into the slide, here you have the one of my personal favorite. If we hit this free beacon link at the very bottom. All right, first of all, it's a fantastic title. String of Felons Worked with Nonprofit Co-Founded by Bill Clinton. And this is...
Not surprising.
Well, but it's just the story. This is a must-read if you have not yet read it. You go through the number of crooks associated with this American India Foundation, which Bill Clinton, I think, is still the honorary chairman or co-chairman of. It was formed in January of 2001, and he's never disclosed properly the various insidious links among the Clinton Foundation, Bill Clinton, and these various goons.
There's Rajat Gupta.
There he is.
And his lawyer. That guy's smiling.
Yeah. I got your money.
Yeah.
So if we go back in, it's very important the trustees of these foundations understand they've got to exercise tight control. Otherwise, when these charities unravel, they will indeed suffer. So we go to the next page. All right, we're going to start in the second country I ever visited, which is Austria. My parents were very nice. 8th grade, spring vacation.
Wow.
Our little school team, our school, you know, some schools send their kids to, I don't know, Hunter Mountain. Horace Mann had a trip to Europe.
Wow.
So they let me go. It was wonderful. And Austria is a very beautiful place. But compare Austria to the United States. It's very interesting. You know, I've got this simple ranking system. A green number is a good number, and a red number is a bad number. See any green numbers?
No.
They're all red. Small population, growing slowly, more slowly than ours, markedly older, small consumption per person, tiny market compared to the U.S. market, heavily reliant on exports. They've got a big problem. Their investment doesn't scale as well as ours does. They have to come up with 44 cents versus a dollar of consumption.
What's Austria's primary source of income?
I don't know the answer to that question. I do know, though, that their Austrian machinery makers are very good. But I can't answer the question of precisely which is the biggest
They don't make
export.
cars or anything. They're not.
It wasn't Audi. I don't know. But an interesting figure that leaps out here is that it's very rural. 66% of the population is in cities, whereas we're 82%.
Oh yeah, that's the
a very
lowest
big,
we've seen actually in a while.
And then you look at the degree to which they have way more doctors and way more hospital beds.
This seems to be a trend with kind of every country except the United States. Why is that?
I don't know. I mean, this could be just a way to to put people in, stuff people into the socialist delivery system who may or may not be needed. You know, or alternatively, I mean, I look at these numbers and I say, either Austria's got it right and we've got a big problem in the United States because we've got so few doctors per 100,000 and hospital beds per 100,000, or Austria's got something wrong. But both, I mean, we shouldn't have.
So far out of whack.
There's something wrong here. And just for viewers know this, but the new viewers, the source for all these figures, you got on the one hand, and we don't have to pull the link up, but the UNCTAD is a free database, and there's a slew of CIA World Fact books. I'm using the one for 2016 to get these data points. So we go to the next page.
It's kind of like the CIA's opinion of facts.
Right. So there's this thing, and we won't pull up many of these links. The first one is just background on the founder of this Life Plus thing, which is basically, it was formed early on in the 90s to encourage care for people with HIV and AIDS. And this Gary Kessler, I guess I spelled his name slightly wrong, is very well known, somewhat controversial. He's created this Life Ball in Vienna. Now, Vienna is a place where there's opulent opera houses, there's extravagant festivals over there. Sausages, and also cakes. And this Life Ball, though, is something else. If we hit the link on the Life Ball,
I've got it.
yeah, it's probably that. Not that one. Yeah, there we go. So you look at these pictures.
Wow.
I mean, it's really opulent stuff. You know, people get together, they dress up, they spend a lot of money. You know, the Austrian Airlines gets involved, big welcome parties, Le Meridien. You know, you either dress up or you don't. Red carpet. You know, this guy decided not to dress.
Underwear. Yeah.
Is that Matthew Perry?
Yeah. No, Matthew McConaughey.
Is that? So you see what I'm talking about here. This is an extravagant party, okay? Now, in theory, it's for a good cause. They sell tickets for this party, and we're going to show you how much they claim they collect. But as with any benefit, you know, you don't really know how many tickets actually were sold or given away. And unless the accounting is very strict, you know, these type of parties are a prescription for fraud.
Just because there's so many. I mean, how much does that tank cost to rent?
Right. Well, and there are so many movie stars who want to get involved.
Charles, look, it's got. This is a corporate logo.
I understand.
So it's sponsored or something.
Right, and you don't know how all of that works. You don't know how carefully it's checked. You know, a lot of times in these type of benefits, the liquor providers will want to give the liquor to you to get the publicity, and you know, there's ample opportunity if you want to be a crook to say that you had to pay for something when you didn't have to pay for something, and celebrities are falling over one another to go to this event. So why am I bringing all this up, you might wonder? Go back into the text. A majority of the declared contributions in 2007 of this life ball went to a Clinton charity that was never organized lawfully, Old Chai. All right, this is in the middle of Hillary's primary, when she was still potentially going to be the first female president of the United States in 2007. You know, a lot of people were probably looking at Hillary and saying, I want to get on the right side of this train. And so in this year, on the next page in a minute, we're going to show you just how much money was raised. But a majority of all the money that went to foreign beneficiaries of this life ball went to this Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative, which didn't actually exist. And we've previously provided, we won't pull the link up, the memo that amplifies some of the concerns. In 2008, they didn't make any contributions, which suggests that maybe they figured out there was a problem and they needed to wait until it was reorganized. But as we've told people in the past, in 2008 and 2009, they illegally reorganized the Clinton Foundation, and the new Chai entity that was the beneficiary here also was not organized lawfully. Okay? The biggest contributions came, and this is one you're going to like. CGI has created this interactive thing. I don't know, I hope it'll work if we pull this link up. It'll just take a second. It says, for best results, use Google Chrome. But what it'll get you to is, yeah, here we go.
Nice.
How do you like that? How do you like them apples? Then you got to hit next and start exploring. And there are 11...
Where to pillage next?
There are 11 commitments from Austria through this crooked Clinton Global Initiative, which never existed as a charity. So who are these 11 entities from Austria? And who did anybody in Austria decide that it might be a reasonable idea to do some due diligence? I don't know if we get any details by hitting any of those. Or
I'm not sure what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, it's all right. Well, for another moment, we'll figure it out.
I don't know.
But there is research to do here in Austria. In the Austrian government, who gave tax benefits, tax credits, to entities for supposedly cooperating with this Clinton Global Initiative, which never was formed properly, to engage in charitable activity? All right?
4 million to Leadership Matters.
All right. So if we go back into the body, and then these contributions from the Life Ball to the Clinton Foundation, it was then called Clinton Health Access Initiative, they grew and they grew. Now I notified earlier this week, I checked to see what stories may be out there concerning the Clinton Foundation, and I happened to see that somebody in German had written an article in Austria about this Life Ball. It was the first I'd ever heard of it. So I did this research, and right away I sent to the promoters of the Life Ball, I sent them an email saying, listen, you got a serious problem here. And of course I've heard nothing back. So the question is, for the government of Austria, if you get this, if you're listening to this, why don't you care about charity fraud? There's a picture of the Chancellor of Austria handing Bill Clinton a check for $1 million, proceeds of this Life Ball. I mean, does nobody do any work in the Chancellor's Department in Austria? Do you not check anything?
I mean, is it possible that everybody just assumes that it's like, hey, it's the Clintons, it's a charity, they're going all over the world, why do we need to check? I guess the previous guys checked.
Right. Well,
could that be it?
That's not the way it's supposed to happen. So if we go to the next slide.
Yeah.
All right, this is these are euros, okay? And what I've done here is I've taken out year by year, and I've grouped them in 3 groupings. So the 2007 to 9 period, that's when there was, in theory, no legal HIV/AIDS operation. They gave 919,878 euros, 879 euros. They say they did, or 26% of all their foreign grants went to an entity that didn't exist. Then in the period where she's Secretary of State, the most active period where she's Secretary of State, 35% of their foreign grants went to this thing that didn't exist lawfully. Then in 2014, she's her first full year out, 56% of the foreign grants go to an entity that was not organized lawfully, that was indeed controlled by the Clinton family illegally. These are their numbers. I took the numbers that are out there on the Lifeball site. We have provided a link to that site. You can check these numbers for yourself. And it'd be one thing if you say, well, I'm over in Austria, I don't know if it's beer or wine or whatever I'm drinking, having the cakes and the food, and so 1% of my foreign grants are wrong. A majority of my foreign grants are to this high profile charity and nobody's done any work. It makes you, when I see this kind of behavior, my hackles go up, because it makes me wonder whether this charity is disclosing all of its incoming receipts, and whether one of the reasons that they're happy to let the Clintons get away with this is they figure, we got them ensnared in our fraud, they're not going to complain about what we're doing. Right? So this is a major league red flag in Austria. If we go to the next page. Now we turn to Canada. Again, Canada, you've got a few greens at the very bottom, but it's small population, growing about the same as we are, older than we are, low consumption, small market, more heavily dependent on exports than we are. Again, up against it on the scale curve, they're so much smaller than we are that they have to keep up. They have to spend more per dollar of consumption than we do. About the same urban concentration. And actually, in this case, we hear a lot about the Canadian healthcare system.
Yeah.
Some people say it's horrible compared to the U.S. But it's interesting to me that the number of doctors and hospital beds are
close,
lower than ours.
Right. That's true. So there we go. We're not the worst in that.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's right. Yeah. So if we go to the next page, and I did promise I'd fly. All right, this is an interesting thing. So we have here the links where I got this information of, who gave what to whom. We have CHI, this new entity, claiming its large donors and identifying one as Global Affairs Canada, which I think is the equivalent of the State Department. And then we have the parent foundation disclosing large grants from Clinton Giustra and from Frank Giustra and the Radcliffe Foundation.
I meant to include Frank Giustra in the graphic for this show.
He's there in spirit.
Yeah.
But this text, again, is lifted from Bill Clinton's Giving Book. And this says that by 2002, the initial donors came from Canada, both from the government of Ireland, the government of Canada, first donors in 2002, and from Canadian citizens. Whereas the information on CHI only concerns, so far that we have from Canada, the period 2010 forward. I think the Canadians are desperately trying to hide just how much money they sent foolishly to the Clinton Foundation starting in 2002-03 timeframe.
Why hide it?
Because the Clinton Foundation was not authorized to do any of the work fighting HIV/AIDS or climate change that the Canadian government may have given money to the Clintons for that purpose. And
don't these people realize, though, that hiding it is just going to make it worse? I mean, no one wants to be like, hey, wait a minute, we're going to come clean. They're just hiding it. Everybody keeps...
Well, I mean, I think that's what we see. I mean, that's what we saw. Actually, it began on November 9th, 2016. The resistance figured out, holy smokes, Donald Trump won. We're going to get caught.
Right.
And so...
And then it's still not giving up.
And so they're not giving up.
Keep lying. Another technique we've seen some people apply.
And we don't like that. So the Clinton Foundation, we won't pull these links up. For the period 1998 to 2007, there are on the IRS form, please don't pull the link up.
Sure.
On the IRS forms, you have to put in the one line your sum total of government grants. They've never done that. They refuse to do that. The IRS has the particulars already, should have the particulars of all incoming grants above 2% of the total revenue. So they should be able to figure out, and they should have figured out, that the Clinton Foundation was hiding government grants. There's no good reason to be hiding those grants. And the bad reason is likely that they take $10 million from Saudi Arabia.
Don't want to tell you about that and say it was a grant.
Well, they take it from Saudi Arabia, and they don't want to admit to Saudi Arabia that they didn't need the money and didn't spend it properly and were using it illegally to fight, in theory, HIV/AIDS or pay for mistresses or whatever they were doing with it.
Right.
So this is a big area that is there. It's in the IRS records. I mean, unless those have disappeared, which I assume they haven't. And incidentally, on the subject of disappearing records, if at this stage the Clinton plan is to say, well, we don't have those records anymore, as a part of a normal plan of records, management, we've bleach bit all those records. Thank you very much. Now you can confess to charity fraud.
Because destroying the records is also fraud.
It's incumbent on them to prove,
Yeah.
make the case to us as the IRS. So I would like to actually, just point out this question of using a fictitious name. We have now in our files a correspondence back and forth with Arkansas showing what the Clinton Foundation, what this guy, hapless Andrew Kessel, who's the CFO, thought, and he's not a lawyer, and he's obviously not, maybe now he's more conversant with it, but at the time he was doing this, when he first arrived on, of all things, around April Fool's Day, 2004, he began, and there's a record here, it's hilarious, of sending these notices into the Secretary of State asking for the right to use a fictitious name. So a fictitious name is if you're 3D Entertainment and you want to have, I don't know, chair reupholstering of Gramercy Park, part of what you have the charter to do that, you just file for the right to do business as in the form of a fictitious name.
I have several DBAs actually.
All right. So you know about it. So in a
But
business,
that's legal. That's
and
not
for a
fictitious.
business, that's totally legal.
Yeah.
But for a charity, it is strictly illegal unless you are authorized for that purpose. You can't say, I'm supposed to be a library and research center in Little Rock, but I'm going to do business as
Strip club.
a strip club, massage parlor, catering service, restaurant, international purveyor of AIDS, drugs. You can't do that. And the fact that he would even apply, he had to be extra specially stupid, because what he did there was an actual form that says, to apply for a fictitious name, and you're going to see that this is a serious federal crime, why I'm focusing on this. To apply for the fictitious name, you do so under the business corporation law of Arkansas, which is not the law that applies to the nonprofit corporation that this is. So what did this Nimrod do? Rather than use the form, which would screw him up, he said, I got it. I'll create a fake form. I'll type out a form, and I'll change the wording to say that under this nonprofit corporation law, I'm filing for a fictitious name. And then when you fill that form out properly, of course, if you're going to do business as some other thing, you have to explain the character of the new business. So what does this idiot do? He leaves that blank.
How on earth could anybody think that was an okay thing? How is that going to go?
Well, because I think what happened is that Bruce Lindsay and Billy Bob Clinton and Hillary and Chelsea I guess she was still in McKinsey then. They probably said, "Look, we got this. Our people.
The president.
I got this." But anyway, unfortunately for Mr. Kessel and for Bruce Lindsay, who I think should be brought up on charges, criminal charges, and disbarred. Their signatures under penalties of perjury are on multiple requests for the use, which are confessions of crimes actually, using fictitious names for a charity. And that's a very big problem, because what happens when you operate a mess like this in so many states and foreign countries, you're making representations continuously to multiple regulators. And New York asks, list all the names for which you'll be using to solicit funds. Many states say that. And of course they tell. Some states, not other states, they don't tell the whole truth. And you just get caught in this thicket of lies. And you can't argue, credibly, however many years it is now, 14 years later, that this is just that mistake. The 117,000th mistake, that was just
a mistake.
It was a mistake.
Right.
Things happen.
Right. Same kind of thing with Vegas. Like all these coincidences, all these omissions. How could they all be happening simultaneously?
A great group out of, I think, Cincinnati did this piece. I don't know if I've got this right. This one here. This came out right before the election, and I would argue this article may have had more to do than the Facebook ads.
What's that?
I don't know what that is. Continue by allowing ads. Go back. Well, whatever. let's go back to, no.
Sorry.
If we go back to the slide,
Yeah.
People can pull this link on their own, and you'll see this story appeared right before the election, and it goes chapter and verse into how in Mississippi, 3 separate times, the Clinton Foundation basically had to enter into settlements for soliciting without having registered. And this story at the time was good, but it didn't. I didn't know enough about it then, as I now know, that in this time frame, Scripps News is a serious operation. They didn't think to check the Arkansas state reports, the annual reports, where they also lied to Arkansas on those reports about the status of their own settlements. So this is November 5th, I guess 3 days before the election, 9 p.m. Might have been Saturday night, was that? 8th, Tuesday, 7th, 6th, yeah. Saturday night this comes out, gets a fair amount of attention. This fellow, Greenblatt, had done some work, a lot of work, looking into the New York State filings of the Clinton Foundation. This was a follow-on piece to other work that he had done. So if we go back quickly into the slides, this is an important one here. This is this Pennsylvania thing down here. Yep, so that should come straight up. What? That's weird.
Not found.
Huh.
Let's try it again.
That's really weird.
What is this document about, Charles?
This is a settlement in Pennsylvania. That's weird.
There you go.
There. This is consent agreement and order. Now this thing should have been disclosed in every state where the Clinton Foundation solicited using this fundraising agent, which also happens to be a fundraising agent, I believe, for some of the Clinton campaigns.
That's O'Brien,
McConnell and Pearson, which is now called something different. But this is a pretty well-known fundraising firm specializing in raising money for really left-leaning charities and left-leaning political candidates. And this is something that you absolutely have to disclose. And they have not disclosed this properly in the many years where they continued to use this firm, OMP, right the way through, I want to say, 2008. So if you go to the next page, all right. Now we focus briefly on the UK. The UK, in terms of people, it's only a fifth the size of the US. You know, they have a problem with population growth, not fast enough, high median age. They spend $30,000 a person roughly on consumption, which is a lot, but still is less than 80% of what we spend.
Wow. And
their consumption is only 15% of ours, therefore. They're more dependent on exports. They don't have quite the scale problem on investing that other people do. About the same, a little bit more urbanized than we are. They have more doctors and the same number of hospital beds, right? So this is an advanced country with a long history, a deep investment base, a rich country. We go to the next page. Here we have a very interesting thing. Remember I said there's this confusion. If you have over here, you have the Clinton Foundation parent company, and over here you have CHAI, and you have the same entity, Unitaid, thinking that it gave money to the Clinton Foundation, but they also gave it to CHAI. When you have currency fluctuations in the value of the pound versus the value of the dollar, and currency fluctuations in the value of these various currencies wherein CHAI and the Clinton Foundation operate, you have an enormous potential for monies to go missing and to sow confusion. So I submit that Unitaid, in fact, probably does not really know exactly where the money that it sent went. They may know that it went to one destination, and then from that destination onwards, they don't precisely know exactly what happened, largely because they don't want to know, in my opinion. When you look at the Unitaid financial statements, gigantic, hundreds of millions of dollars per year, they use, in one case, the government auditor of India.
Yeah.
And then when that didn't work for them, they reached out to the government auditor of the Philippines, paying like $50,000 for an audit, which is peanuts for an audit.
Yeah, we spoke with Stuart Dean about that.
Yeah, just bogus. So this is the UK government and a consortium of governments in which the UK and Unitate is very important. And also we talked at length about the Children's Investment Fund Foundation. We did a special presentation, one of our first about them. And the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, interestingly, there are two of them. There's one in the US and there's one in the UK. And the sums that they gave are massive, and their failures to do due diligence are amazing.
Equally massive.
Considering that the Children's Investment Fund principals, and now they're divorced, the husband and wife team that, created this mess in the beginning, but the fund professionals, pride themselves on being smarter than the average bear and more detailed than the oriented normal person. So that's a lot of money to go to these frauds. Elton John has as well 2 foundations, US and UK. And he's sending $5 to $10 million in here, and also getting involved in a lot of charity concerts around the world. Same sort of problem as the Life Ball. Indeed, I think he's involved with the Life Ball.
Wow. I think he said he's resigning from performing because there's something wrong with his throat.
Yeah, well, he's had a long run. So here, again, we have the same issue of the UK not wanting to fess up about how early on they were involved with this fraud. But if you look into this book, Joe Coniston's Man of the World, on page 119, there's this excerpt here which suggests that the UK began getting involved in around 2002, but most importantly that this billionaire, David Sainsbury, who's very much involved in charity, also may have put up $1 million in 2002 to fight HIV/AIDS. There's no evidence of that flow into the Clinton Foundation. Now maybe the IRS has some evidence of it, but this is, I think, another example of an unregistered office with perhaps undeclared bank accounts operating in countries around the world where they had not registered properly to solicit or registered properly to form the subsidiaries that needed to be formed to do this work. This is an incredible mess going back to 2002, maybe earlier.
Yeah.
Now, if we hit this, this is a really interesting one, this first parliamentary link here. This is an excerpt from, I think, the Parliament, which shows Unitate dispersed $26.5 million between in 2007 for this program, the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative. $26.5 million. They have details, 19 pediatric formulations, including new combinations of this drug for HIV drugs or antiretroviral drugs for children. Okay, 26.5 million, and a further 35.9 for second-line drugs. This is in a year, 2007. Those are the two. This is a parliamentary document. So the UK government believes that this happened.
Right.
Okay, but how could this have happened when there was no such charity? Is the UK that rich that they're going to let this kind of money flow to a charity that doesn't exist, and then send these brilliant, parliamentary experts in to check it, and they can't see this fraud?
Yeah, it's astounding. How is no one doing anything about this?
I think, you see, because I think this could be a pattern and practice inside these rich countries, that what the politicians, they wouldn't refer to themselves as crooked, but they see these pressing problems around the world, and they see the opportunity to create these new non-governmental organizations that maybe they can be given the opportunity to run once they get kicked out of parliament or prime ministership or whatever.
Right.
And they say, this is my retirement plan. It's better than an IRA. This is, put money into this. Next thing you know, I'll be traveling around the world, and
Private jets.
private jet, catering, life ball, you name it.
Right.
So if we go back in, we are actually almost done. We could go now to the next page. All right, we've had a lot. I am not a lawyer. I want to bring this up again and again and again.
Mm-hmm.
But what I have done here is I just went through a list of possible crimes that it seemed to me would make sense for the FBI, the Department of Justice, people around the world to consider if you have similar types of laws to this one.
Prosecuting, not perpetrating.
Yeah. If we pull up, and this is an exercise. I did this for the convenience of the foreign people,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously the Department of Justice, I hope, is way ahead of me, as is the FBI. If we pull up the third link there, not that one. Not that one, yeah. All right, yes. Sorry, that's odd.
Not that one.
It's not going properly.
Let's try it another way. This is the one you want?
Yes. That is so weird. Well, let's do it a different way. Let's do 18 US in Google, 18 USC 1342. Just try it that way.
Sure.
Yeah. 18 USC 1342. All right, hit that. Let's see what happens. There you go.
Well, we saw this before. That is weird. I don't know why.
Yeah, so, but I'll read this out loud. Whoever for the purpose of conducting, promoting, or carrying on by means of the postal service, direct mail, something they were doing a lot of, any scheme or device mentioned in section 1341, which we'll get to, of this title, or any other unlawful business uses or assumes or requests to be addressed by any fictitious, false, or assumed title, name, or address, or name other than his own proper name, or takes or receives from any post office. Remember those post office police, Seinfeld, they're rough. Or authorized depository of mail matter, any letter, postal card, package, or other mail matter addressed to any such fictitious, false, or assumed title, name, or address, or name other than his own proper name, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 5 years or both. This is one count of using a fictitious name. You're using, out of unregistered offices, you're using fictitious names to do mass mailings involving millions of pieces over multiple months around the world, across state lines. I mean, this is just sitting there, right there. And how come, Dopey James Comey, this law was in effect from 2001 to 2005. How come Dopey James Comey and Mad Dog Mueller didn't see this 2001 to 2005?
Well, I would have to say, Charles, it's because no sensible prosecutor would actually want to go after
That's
the
Vince
Clintons.
Foster.
Well, he's not a prosecutor.
Oh,
But
all right, and he's still
he
got
lets
arrows.
you know what happens when you're not sensible.
Right, you get arrows in your back.
Suicide.
And Adam Schiff is still drooling. So if we go back to the slides. This is a very, lawyers at your leisure, think about the fact pattern, listen to our videos, look at our slideshow. Here are rich veins to mine for criminal actions, which if you achieve a successful prosecution and a guilty plea, you're talking about crimes in some cases that's 30 years in prison per count.
Well, RICO, of course,
Yeah.
frauds and swindles, fictitious name or address, fraud by wire, radio, or television, bank fraud, attempted and conspiracy, conspiracy to defraud the United States, bribery of public officials and witnesses.
And this 371 is in the Mueller indictment that just was handed down on those
Oh, yeah,
Russians.
right.
So this is an interesting one to hit here. I hope this one comes up. Okay, message to the FBI, message to Chuck Grassley, message to Ron DeSantis, to Trey Gowdy, to the U.S. Attorney in Little Rock and other U.S. attorneys. You want to understand why Uma Abedin and Dennis Cheng transitioned from their roles into the roles that they held starting in Cheng's case, I think it was July 2011, and then Uma around June 30th, 2012. Read this memo carefully. We'll just scroll through it. This is a list of the people who went to a Clinton Foundation dinner while Hillary was Secretary of State. And to me, it's a suspect list. I would just go right through this, name by name, every single person here, and I would check their donations to the Clinton Foundation and what they may have gotten back from the Clinton Foundation and their correspondence file and where are the emails on all this. Here you have
Sandy
partner at
Burglar.
DLA yes,
Oh, yeah?
Sandy Burglar.
That was Comey's law firm, wasn't it?
Right.
DLA
Well, it's a
Bank?
big law firm. But you start looking through this, and I'm telling you, I'm sure Erskine Bowles is supposed to be a good guy, but I just go through this list, and my head started spinning. I mean, this Beth DeZoretz was at the center of the Mark Rich pardon negotiations.
Is that his ex-wife?
Beth, no, not ex-wife. She's just a known bundler, Democratic operative. But you go through this. This is 9 pages of names, many of whom I think were likely seeking or deriving economic benefits from the Clinton Foundation or from the State Department or from the presidential efforts. This is a rich vein to mine here, another rich vein to mine. If you want to flesh out who could likely be members of this vast, I don't want to say it's a left-wing conspiracy, it's just a
Criminal conspiracy.
Yeah, it's a vast criminal conspiracy. So here, what might happen?
A little less confident than this morning.
So this is really, we don't even have to hit the first. Apparently there's this gigantic, there's activity in this Ring of Fire, the earthquake stuff. There's, you know, the Ring of Fire.
Mexico City had a huge earthquake.
Right, and then all around, that's a story that talks about it. We don't need to dwell on it. But I think it's safe to say what we're seeing in the last year in particular is the beginning of the exposure of this gigantic public corruption. We put the Thomas Jefferson quote up, I think, last time or 2 times ago. We predicted in that book that public corruption will have seized the head of government. And I think that's what we've seen. It did seize the head of government. It went to, and this is an approach, this is the American Bar Association writing about, you know, the approach that you should take towards prosecuting public officials and figures for corruption. I think the American people deserve to understand just how corrupt, not simply the Obama administration may have been, but previous administrations, and if it goes into states like New York State and California, Illinois, elsewhere, we pay $6 trillion a year for government.
Wow.
And that's all in all portions of government. We deserve an honest accounting. We deserve to identify these people who have been getting rich, basically, off the public purse. And it's got to stop. These people have to be exposed. There needs to be a clawback. We need to get our money back to reduce our debt. And this is a lengthy memo we won't go into. We go back to the slides. This is a shameless plug for a piece that just went out. That one. Somebody you know might have had a hand in writing this thing.
Oh yeah, look at that.
But it's a lengthy piece, but there's a gentleman by the name of John, I'll slaughter the name, I don't know if it's pronounced Giacalone or Giacalone, who is a veteran FBI man who seems to have been centrally involved in what was supposed to be a real investigation into Hillary Clinton's misuse of classified information, but he abruptly resigned in February 2016. This is a piece that provides some additional color into why it is possible that maybe this fellow resigned. We have talked early on, Jason, about the walk-in senior person in the State Department. That's what this is all about here.
He's the guy who received the info?
It seems to me it's likely that he was, yeah.
Wow, that's cool when we get these, dots connecting and pieces coming together from other parts of the story. Because I remember I first heard about that walk-in State Department person when people were investigating Seth Rich.
Right. Really?
Yeah, because the size of the redacted section of the document, if you copied that font and laid Seth Rich over that, it fit. But he's too young to have fit the description.
Right.
The guy said that he had worked for the State Department for years, and Seth Rich never worked for the State Department that we know of.
So this is Donald Trump, one of his recent tweets. And he makes, as usual, Donald Trump, you can like or dislike him, but he is not shy about making caustic comments.
Yeah, that's true.
And here, I mean, honestly, why did we spend $1.7 billion, if that's the real number? Why do we send $1.7 billion in cash to Iran?
It makes no sense, and no other president has ever done anything like that, have they?
I don't know.
It's
that
like
we
a bank robbery of the Federal Reserve.
It's like nobody's explaining anything. I mean, it's like, and this is again following a period where billions went missing from the State Department and no inspector general, and that you can't run a small business like this, let alone the largest government in the world. You just can't do what they did. So we go back into it.
Someone in the Periscope comments says, this shows that crime does pay. Now, I've always said that it's pretty obvious that crime pays because it would have gone out of business a long time ago if it didn't.
Yeah.
It's just the criminals.
It's time. Crime may pay, but it's time for justice to pay back.
That's right.
So we won't pull up the Comey Book Tour thing, but it's a great thing from Conservative Treehouse from Sundance about.
Where is he coming? We should go ask him what the hell happened.
Yeah, his book is out in, I think, April.
Is he going to come to Barnes & Noble where we could do another...
That would be nice.
Yeah, bring Laura.
Now, this is a funny one, though. I noticed this. I like to end on some light notes, but
Which was
this Daily Caller. For those of you who are sick of Match.com, I thought this was hysterical for a number of reasons. First, look at the number of Facebook shares, 161,582 Facebook shares. The rough rule of thumb is that for every 100 views, somebody will share.
Wow.
So that means this has been very actively viewed.
Trump dating. Oh, look at the hair on the T. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, it is.
But I thought you can't use... Does Trump own that? Because I thought you can't use the name Trump.
I don't think he would have. It's too funny, though.
I can tell you that I've seen a lot on dating sites where it'll say if you voted for Trump,
you're a chump.
Yeah, get out of here. So.
Well, we're in New York.
Right.
So if we go back into it, this Barron's cover story here, this link here, is very significant to those of us who follow finance and in particular General Electric. Barron's is a company that is owned part of the Dow Jones, was part of the Dow Jones empire. And of course, General Electric is, I think, the only remaining original Dow component.
It's got to go soon.
1892 to the present. And for Barron's, which is operating in a space that's very competitive, Zero Hedge and others are taking share from Barron's. Zero Hedge is free. You got to pay for this. For Barron's to write a negative story is unusual. To write a negative story like this on General Electric is especially unusual. Tomorrow's a holiday. I think a lot of investors do still read Barron's. I'm kind of sick of it. I regard it as a little bit of a comic book at this point because it's so late, typically. But for Barron's to write this kind of a negative story, and albeit it goes through it in some depth, it is very striking, and it's going to put, I think, additional selling pressure on the stock when the market opens wherever GE starts trading. I have a story that is in process that may come out tomorrow that I wrote the story before this came out, and it's with the editor right now. It's going to go in another publication. And my story more focuses on, rather than picking apart GE the way these people do by business line, I encourage people to think about GE country by country. And that's the real way. When I was doing complicated transactions around the world, when you're trying to borrow money against a multinational, you really have to understand not the business line consolidated results. You've got to understand in France, what are your assets and liabilities in France? What are your legal obligations? What are the rules against borrowing against collateral inside and outside France? And how do you need, let's say, $6 billion spread around the world. How do you get that money into France? How do you get the cash flow that arises in France out of France to service your debt, to pay your dividends? Very complicated stuff. And that's the problem with GE. Bad as this article is, it doesn't even begin to get into what we call the leakage that occurs with these complex rules. Because in abundance of caution, the French, for example, to pick on them, they know of the propensity of U.S. managers to run a business and then slough the liabilities off on some dumb state or foreign country. They don't declare the liability, then they go bankrupt, and along the way, as happened in Enron, they're paying the executives a lot of money,
and then everybody runs.
And everybody runs. So the French are wise to that. Germans are wise to that. Others are wise to that. And when you start thinking about GE from that perspective, you say, now wait a minute. Typically, this is a company that always tries to put a brave, positive face on its results. The January report that came out, the January 24th or 5th, whatever it was, People called it an earnings report. I called it a loss report. There were no earnings. It was a gigantic $10 billion loss.
And you know, people who know you for your Clinton Foundation investigations, Charles, may not be aware that you were the guy who investigated GE and said that it was basically a giant fraud. The GE finance, you know, they had shifted from like a light bulb company to essentially a bank, or what was it?
A badly organized, badly positioned financial institution. And yeah, back in 2007-8, I happened on that one by chance, and I'm not tooting my own horn here. I will say that General Electric is at least 1,000 times as complicated as the Clinton Foundation.
So much more complicated.
Yeah,
huh?
it's very difficult to get through their financial statements. It operates all over the world. They issue hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pages of disclosure that you've got to go through and try to understand.
Is that some form of corporate filibustering? They're just putting out so much information that it's impossible to research, or virtually impossible?
Yeah, and they found themselves, it's funny how these things happen, and it's why this is going to be a great, and it's a sad story, but it'll be a great story to go through, a cautionary tale. In May of 2000, General Electric was the darling of the universe. The internet bubble had crashed, and suddenly said, you know what, bricks and mortar.
Right.
We like bricks and mortar.
Companies.
And you know, the value of GE went to like $60 a share. It has not split. It's now like 14, 15. This is 18 years ago, it was 60. And if it's 14, 15 today, you don't even need to hire McKinsey to figure out you've got a really troubled company. I mean,
but there were people who were naysayers when you came out with that research. They said, "Oh, you're crazy. This is..."
Well, but you see, that's the standard. The reason they were saying I was crazy, maybe I was crazy, but the reason they said it is that at the time, GE was one of the very few companies whose debt was still AAA rated. Mm-hmm. It was a Dow component. It is and was heavily regulated around the world. It had a lot of research analysts covering it. And the theory was, you know, how could one guy see what everyone else didn't see? And I think the answer is because I was just one guy. I wasn't a slave. You know, GE is so big that if you're in the banking business, chances are you're doing some work for GE, or you're in the advertising business, chances are, you know, you're selling ads to GE, or the media business or whatever. They have their fingers everywhere, and you know, they have deals with everybody. And so if you're on the inside of that, it's very tough.
You're not motivated to find out what they're doing wrong and end the gravy train. Maybe that's the same phenomenon that's happening around the world with the Clinton Foundation.
It is one and the same. That's why. And so what happened? That's why my ears. I actually on General Electric. I came on General Electric by chance. I mean, I didn't set about saying I'm going to find GE and grind them into the dirt. I went to.
Although that did happen.
That may happen. But I had not. I'd been with my kids for a number of years, not really doing much in semi-retirement, and I thought about getting back in and doing some business work. And I thought, you know, why don't I see whether I think the market is under or overvalued? So I picked the financial filings of 25 very large American companies, including GE. And I set about systematically doing what I know how to do, you know, looking at the numbers and saying, okay, that's overvalued, this is undervalued. And I got to GE, I was like, I don't know what the hell this is. You know what, this is ridiculous. And I almost said, you know, screw it, I'm not going to look at it. And I put it on the side, and I finished all the other ones. And then I said, I'm going to go back to GE. And I figured out a very simple thing. What was really simple is GE, the whole company, had consolidated financial results. And the troubled financial unit, which was a piece of the whole company, had financial results. And all I did is I said, what if I subtract GE Capital from GE Parent? What do I see? And what I saw was a nightmare, because everybody thought that GE Capital, which was aggressively leveraged up, too much debt, crazy capital structure, too much short-term debt, that the mighty industrial engine of GE would support the potentially troubled finance piece. But when I saw that the residual was deeply troubled, erratic revenue swings, declining profit margins, little profits and cash flow in the US, whoa, this really gave me
a time bomb.
And then when I saw that the way in which, if you'll notice, even in this article, the analysts who cover GE are primarily, now it's mostly an industrial company, but they're mostly industrial analysts. They didn't have the biggest piece of GE until, you know, I got into this, and others got into it, was by far and away their troubled finance and insurance business.
Huh.
And they didn't have insurance and finance analysts really covering this. And so they would produce these mammoth research reports, and GE would have these conventions.
How'd they get so far afield from making light bulbs and refrigerators and jet engines?
Well, it's kind of like, I'm not saying this is Madoff, okay, but it's kind of, there's similarities, and it'd be worthwhile learning for, how did Madoff convince so many very smart, successful people to blindly put money in his fund, in many cases, all of your money into a fund where the auditing firm was operating on the second floor of a strip mall in Westchester County somewhere. I mean, it just wasn't smart. People get greedy and they look at this and they say, under Welch, he took a stock that was 25 cents a share, and by the time he left, it was like 40, and splits and dividends and all this kind of stuff. And it's stock is my money. I had 10,000, now I've got 14 million, and maybe there's something screwy, but a lot of people are buying the stock.
Well, that's what I mean. It's almost like, it's the same thing with the Clintons. So Bernie Madoff has his accounting firm in a strip mall. Here we've got a president with a strip club, and everyone has so much confidence in these guys because they just say, well, everybody else is giving millions of dollars to this charity. It's got to be okay.
Well, we see that's the part of human nature that when we think about it, but most people, I can't tell you, and I'm sure you have the same thing happen to you. Most people, when they find out what I do, they will say, well, what do you think of this? What are you doing with your money? And under the lazy man approach, a lazy person approach that okay, if I like this person, I'll just find out what he's doing, I'll just do what he's doing. Instead of really doing the kind of in-depth work that you're supposed to do, whether it's on a charity doing diligence, on a company doing diligence, every human being, I've discovered this in my career, is that every human being grows up in a family where there are not racial prejudices, there are prejudices against certain types of businesses. Some people will say, I've heard this many times, I will never invest in a shipping company.
Right. I think you said that.
Did I say that? Okay, maybe I did. So shipping companies, I don't like them. Garment companies, I don't like them. Companies where the financial...
Cryptocurrency, you don't like.
I don't like that. But because, we're off on a side tangent.
Yeah.
But so I think this story, I don't like Barron's particularly, but I cannot overemphasize enough the significance of this. This is going to rattle around the ecosystem around the world. Maybe people will read the article that I will have tomorrow. And I think intense pressure is going on this. There's a chance that GE will be booted from the Dow Jones Industrial Average. The theory is that the Dow Jones company should be, reflective of the best companies, the best-in-class brand, and how watching this track record of stumbling under a guy, and you talk about inventing the names of these characters, Jeffrey I Melt shareholder value Immelt, and coming on the heels of Jack I Welch on deals Welch. You could make that stuff up, right? But you look at this history, now we got 10 years of history on this thing. And if we go back into the...
Before we leave, though, the other thing we should mention about General Electric and Jeffrey Immelt, they both come up in the Audacity files because General Electric no longer is making light bulbs and refrigerators. That's been sold to a company in China. They're a military contractor making jet engines, avionics, etc. And there is an entire group of missing damn emails from Hillary Clinton that General Electric and Boeing have them that they refuse to release between the Clinton Foundation, Hillary Clinton's State Department, and these two military contractors.
So if we just quickly go into the slides again, I won't belabor this point, but if we just hit the New York Times link, since you're subscribed now, it's the second one. Now, this is actually sort of about me, and but you notice it came out March 7th, 2009. That was almost to the day the bottom of the market. And what I believe happened unwisely is that the administration made a decision that if GE tanks, there will be no, there will be no Obama second term. If GE tanks the global market, So we're going to take this thing and whatever we need to do, we're going to do. We're going to lower interest rates, whatever. Joe Nocera actually was very nice to me, very professional. I don't know whether he's still at the New York Times or not. But he wrote an article. He got GE on the phone, it's the New York Times. And you see here
there we go.
Mentioned. And the situation at GE back in 2007 to 9 is, as I will be explaining in this article, it's worse today than it was back then. By what they were able to do, they were able to get rid of a lot of assets in this low interest rate environment. They were able to convince a lot of purchasers of GE Capital stuff to buy the stuff. But what ordinary people looking at this history won't understand is that the devil is in the details of the contracts. When you when you divest an asset as a corporation, the buyer typically requires you to make representations and maybe to take contingent liabilities or actual liabilities. And so to unscramble, if we see rising interest rates, which will cause the value of many assets to plummet, if disgruntled purchasers of these GE assets, have buyer's remorse and see this carnage, they could well come back after GE for various reasons, real and imagined.
But maybe it's
suing.
Fraud because they.
And you also have the spectacle of GE. I have friends where GE got its start in upstate New York and then in Pittsfield, Massachusetts area. I've been told by some of them that the GE people don't really want to even understand the extent of their environmental liabilities because it's such an old company. In some of these plants, you don't want to go into the foundation and see underneath the factory floor and see what could be there and what may have gone into the water and into the water table and here and there. So when you start stress testing a company like this, people re-examine. You're like jilted suitors, jilted wives, or whatever. You find out that this is not as advertised. You jump back in, you put enormous selling pressure on it. Then the question becomes, does the Trump administration bail this thing out? Now, I should hasten to point out, neither I nor my family have any long or short positions on GE or any other related securities. I'm not, talking a book on an investment game. I'm just analyzing. But I think, this is going to come very much back into focus. And this is just a company that I think was a structurally unsound company.
So why would they bail it out? Why not let it tank?
Well, because the consequences are going to be profound by letting it tank. I think it may well be the right thing to do. You're talking here about hundreds of thousands of retirees. We don't know how much money is in the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation.
But it's a military contractor now. They're not making. Do they have electric plants still? Do they?
They have all sorts. The problem with GE is they're in too many different things. They have, what you know about, and then all the joint ventures and side deals and investments is just enormously complex. To go through this, I doubt you could probably take one gigantic law firm and one gigantic accounting firm and ask them to produce a report, and I don't think they could do it in a year.
BDK and Perkins Coie.
Yeah, I don't think so.
They could do it in 10 minutes.
Or BKD.
BKD, whatever.
BAD.
BAD.
So I think there's a few more things.
One more slide? Oh, yeah. Sorry.
It's all right. So we just thought we'd have, we can go to the next page. This is just to give our viewers a sense. We really like the conversations that we've begun with various and sundry people. We like to have everybody back on. But I don't think we've really had a bad guest. And so we've had some phenomenal guests. But we are in the process now of trying to organize our schedule to get Biljana back. There have been a lot of developments in Sweden that we really need to concentrate upon. There's a courageous woman who's controversial in India who's been exposing GE fraud, and now that GE is back in the crosshairs here in the United States in the home market, she is extremely controversial. She's a whistleblower. Ordinarily, when whistleblowers allege problems, they're supposed to be given a hospitable environment to do that. India doesn't seem to be working that way, so instead of
Neither does the United States.
But this is really bad. We don't throw acid on people and destroy their lives and nearly kill them. And this, I don't think. Maybe we do. But this is we're going to get to the bottom of what's really happening with Seema Sapra. She's got, on this website, there's a lot written about what she went through. going into GE as a trained lawyer, asked to help GE avoid fraud. Instead of finding that GE was trying to avoid fraud, she seems to believe they were embracing fraud in India, in and around a time where I think the current CEO of GE had connections in India. I think he worked in India. So this is something we're going to get to in great depth. We have our friend Michael Smith, who's been doing yeoman's work around the world. He's doing some traveling. We definitely want to get him back on. Inspector Clouseau Chalandon is
that his actual title, Inspector?
no, it's just
Oh, got it.
we're going to get him. I've seen a lot of comments, positive comments about
Everybody
Fabian.
loved that episode.
Yeah, so we're going to definitely get him back on. There's a lot of good work he's doing. We have Harmon and Carolyn Dare. Wilfred will be back on next week. And we need to get the great Stuart Dean back on. There's a whole bunch of new information I have that I have to share with him. And assuming his schedule will work. So that, if we look at this, that we would have the next, six Sundays booked. So it may be, Jason, that we have to go to twice a week or something.
That's fine. And then also, of course, Charles, you've been invited by the German Bundesstaat to give a presentation about what happened.
We haven't, we were awaiting confirmation of that. We're going to be careful how we do that, of course, because I don't want to get crosswise with whatever the laws are in the U.S. about doing that.
Oh.
And in Germany. So,
you can't go give a speech?
Well, it depends. If I don't know exactly. Well, I don't know exactly who is going to be.
We could ask Lionel, or I know an immigration lawyer. That's not really immigration.
Well, we'll get to
law.
the bottom. We'll get to the bottom of it. But there's a lot of good stuff going on. Thank you for all your support and help. The art department. I mean, I love, of all the faces on here, I think the one that Bill Clinton's is just.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just.
Well, because when we had decided to use this graphic, I was racking my brain a little bit as to how I was going to get so many cartoon characters in there. And I figured out a technique. Bill was the first I started with, and it was so successful that I decided to carry on.
It's amazing. Very well done.
So there we go. That's it. That's it for the week. I'm going to try tomorrow to speak with our googly-eyed friends at YouTube and try to restore live streaming, because I do believe that the foundational claim of a copyright infringement for showing the web page of a company that is accused of basically crimes that is supported by evidence, I don't think that's a legitimate copyright infringement claim. If I were advertising a horse training school here in New York City using their logo, that might be legitimate, but they really need to refute my claims by presenting countermanding evidence, something that they have refused to do. So I'm very hopeful that Google and YouTube will see the error of their ways and reinstate the live streaming. And irrespective of whether I'm right or wrong about the copyright claim, I was given in a written letter terms under which the matter could be resolved, and that was take the video down within 48 hours. And then I was not given 48 hours within which to respond. So that alone should reinstate the live streaming and allow me to remove the video, but also illustrate to our audience how large corporations and international law firms can intimidate and try to impede the truth. So it just really underscores, Charles, my statement that I make very frequently about Crowdsource the Truth being a community-sponsored news resource. I don't want to take advertisements from the Spanish Riding School or the Corn, whatever it's called,
the Clinton Foundation,
or the Clinton Foundation, or General Electric, or Lockheed Martin, or Ford, or ExxonMobil, or Merck, or any of these huge companies that are in a regular practice of influencing the news. I don't want. Now imagine if I had gone the traditional route and said, hey, you know what, we're going to work every day for 15 months and more to build a YouTube channel, to get great guests, to work hard with you and the other people that I bring onto the show here, to rely on income from ads from YouTube, and then YouTube decides through an arbitrary set of circumstances that have no bearing on the law, the Constitution, or even their own guidelines. They just decide at any given moment that they're going to pull that financial rug out from under me. Well, I could be in a very precarious situation from the standpoint of a business. So we've chosen to keep Crowdsource the Truth as a community-sponsored news resource, and as such, people who are watching the show on a regular basis really need to consider going to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and becoming monthly sponsors, even for $1, $5, $10 a month. We're approaching 48,000 subscribers on
Great.
YouTube, and we're still on YouTube. The whole library of Crowdsource the Truth videos are still available. This video will be uploaded as soon as we end the live broadcast, but they're trying to limit our reach. They're trying to limit what we can do. People can also make one-time sponsorship payments at paypal.me/crowdsourcethetruth, and I've added this handy QR code to allow people to sponsor the channel by cryptocurrency. And I know you're not a fan of the cryptocurrency, but there's been somewhat of a comeback in the recent weeks. It's back over 10,000, and some people have questioned my logic in describing this increasing value asset, and why would anyone want to provide that as sponsorship. The point is, if you bought into Bitcoin at 6,000 and now it's 10,720, you could send $20 worth of Bitcoin, and it sort of, that could be negligible in your whole Bitcoin portfolio, and you can use this handy QR code right here on screen. Just point your phone at it and send your sponsorship payment. Was there anything else you wanted to share, Charles?
No, I think that's it. I think that's good. Thank you very much, Jason.
Thank you, as always. And I will be back tomorrow. I will see everybody then.